Well, here we are. One of the biggest races coming up that affects Milford, next to our rep, is our senator. And you're going to learn tonight what our current senator has been doing and what she wants to do in the future for us. So why don't we start with an introduction in case, well, I think everybody in Milford knows you. You've been around.
Well, I've certainly had a wonderful time getting to know everybody. And, a good part of it was starting right here with you, Al, not too long ago. Actually feels like a really long time ago for a pretty big episode for this show, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it's great to be back. Thank you for having me. I am State Senator Becca Rousch. I'm so honored and privileged to serve in the State Senate. I was first elected in 2018. I'm a married mom of 2 young kids. Next term, I'll be the only mom of kids under 10 in all of our state Senate. Have never planned to go into politics, but was really encouraged to do so, to put my skills and experience to work. And we've had tremendous successes over my last several years in public service, really delivering those real results that make a difference in people's lives, making your life a little bit easier, life a little bit fairer, a little more equitable, and hopefully a little less expensive.
I always start, as you know, with the same question.
Mm-hmm.
Becca, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
You should vote for me because I have a proven track record of success, because my heart is deeply in it, because I am in this not because I ever wanted to be a politician or have power, but because I wanted to do some good in the world. And because my track record over the last several years of service shows that I deliver results each and every time. I got into this work to get it done, and that is exactly what I am doing. Not only in terms of being in community with people, especially now we're able to, be robustly in community with people again, which is so wonderful, especially for me as an extroverted person, getting to spend time together, but also on the droves of different policy issues that we address, especially our health care and our reproductive health, particularly in this moment after Roe v. Wade was recently overturned, and also delivering those state dollars right back, reinvesting into our communities. This term alone, I've brought back over $25 million from our state revenues into our towns and cities and the districts that I represent, including a significant chunk of money right here for Milford.
Now, I got to ask, because we were just with our rep, Brian Murray,
Mm-hmm.
and he mentioned that you're not technically representing Milford yet.
That's correct.
But somehow we got an earmark, and he said he didn't even have to be the one that started.
Yeah, that's true. That's just another example of the kind of service that I deliver and the kind of dedication that I bring to this role. A big part of what we do, the most important part of what we do, is uplifting all the people that we are here to help. And part of that is by securing those state dollars. So when an opportunity came up and I knew that I was going to be working with the fine folks here in Milford, and Representative Murray and I are working already quite well as a team, a really close-knit team. So when an opportunity presented itself for me to secure $45,000 for the senior center here in Milford, I jumped at that opportunity and got it. I've also secured $650,000 in a bond authorization for regional bridge and dam restoration work, and nearly $300,000 for regional economic development projects, over $100,000 for regional education projects, and there's even more in the pipeline, with nearly $750,000 for in a bond authorization for water infrastructure right here in Milford, and making sure that people have access to the water that we all need. We all need clean running water. And the water department here has a number of capital projects that need to get done. and I'm here to help make sure that can happen.
Well, you started out getting near and dear to our hearts, finding money for our seniors.
Yeah.
That $45,000 would have gone to some other town.
It would have gone somewhere, yeah. Would have gone maybe to another town or into some kind of state project, but that's $45,000 that we can reinvest right here in our senior center. And actually supporting senior centers is something that I've been doing since the very beginning of my service. I've secured funding for senior centers in several other parts of my district as well. In my first term, I served as the vice chair of the Elder Affairs Committee. So not only these, sort of specific dollar amounts that go directly to Milford, for example, but also statewide, our senior centers are funded based on a formula. And in fact, in my first term, my very first budget, there was a proposal to cut that money. And I said, not on my watch. And I worked collaboratively with the chair of the committee and the chair of Ways and Means to make sure that our funding for our seniors and our senior centers and councils on aging was not going to go anywhere. Not only for the level funding, for sort of basic programs, and sort of standard operations, but also for innovation grants, right? This is how our senior centers grow and expand and provide new and exciting services for our seniors, especially as the times change, right? The census, happened not too long ago, right? That's how we actually all ended up being here, is because the census happened and then redistricting happened after that. The census was done digitally. So part of the funding that, part of the programming that senior centers have been doing was to help our older adults access digital resources and also to do it safely. So in fact, another senior center in my district, and I'm happy to work with the fine folks here in the Milford Senior Center to bring this if there's interest, is a, sort of a cyber awareness kind of 101 course for seniors, or an hour-long experiential class, basically, on how to be aware when you're doing stuff online of scams and other sorts of privacy concerns.
Well, that's really interesting because so many of our seniors are home alone. Mm-hmm. And they're just targets. I mean, they're lonely. They have a nice voice column.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know is they're being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Without even knowing.
Yeah, it's a big part of what I do as a senator is to make sure that we're talking with people all the time. So one of the things that, once we came out of the pandemic peak, that we started, in fact, we started it even during the pandemic. We started having virtual senior coffee hours that are reserved just for seniors, older adults in the district. We started doing them on Zoom because we couldn't be together due to COVID. And now we've been able to get back in person, and we go around to all the senior centers and just, grab a cup of coffee and sit down and have a chat for an hour. And we've had terrific conversations with older adults all throughout the district, including right here in Milford.
Now, you got into politics because you were so shy?
Yes.
And you went to
totally.
a meeting and started doing things that got people's attention?
I never planned to go into politics. This is not what I thought my career was going to look like. I didn't run for office because I wanted to be a politician or because I thought it would be, cool to do or I craved power, or any of those things that you might hear from some others. I got into this to do some good in the world. And, I first ran actually for my town meeting in my town, and I was elected, and I showed up prepared, and because it didn't occur to me to not show up prepared. It didn't even enter my realm of possibility. And after the very first night of a 5-night town meeting session that year.
5 nights?
Yeah, that was a long one. But a whole bunch of people came up to me afterward and said, "What else are you going to run for? You're awesome." And I looked over my shoulder thinking they were talking to somebody else, but they were talking to me. And, and about 6 months later, I was running for the state Senate. And a year after that, I'd been elected as the third woman, the second Democrat, and the first Jewish person ever in the history of the Commonwealth to represent my district. And I'm so honored and truly humbled to serve in this capacity and to help. My team and I, especially through the pandemic, have helped thousands and thousands of people. And so we've really done some good in the world. We've brought those state dollars back into our towns. We've made some really great advancements on the policy side. So we're doing great stuff. And that's why I'm running for re-election, so we can keep getting it done, keep delivering those results that make a difference.
Now, I can see having children being an obstacle you have to face every day. Because when we grew up, we had 3 against 2. My sainted mother lived with us. So my darling bride and I always had help. Mm-hmm. But is it still an obstacle to run as a woman? Women and
particularly women of color and people of color on the ballot, we always face more challenges along the way. Religious minorities, and we also face different sorts of challenges along the way.
But aren't we all religious minorities?
Maybe not.
I was going to say, is there a real majority?
I will tell you, as a Jewish person, I definitely face anti-Semitism on the trail.
Still?
Absolutely, on the trail, in my office, and it's deeply disappointing. I'm certainly not surprised by it at this stage of the game, especially, but it is. I think it's a really unfortunate reality that many of us as candidates have to overcome, and also just a really unfortunate commentary, if you will, on where we are in society right now. Especially with the really crisis of mental health care. We just passed a Senate-led initiative on mental health, and I'm actually really, really proud of the work that I have done in mental health broadly, and particularly supporting youth mental health services, because the vitriol and hate and sort of just not constructive speech that we particularly find on social media is in fact at least correlating, if not causing, that youth mental health crisis that we continue to see. And in fact, just the same way that I created space specifically to listen to seniors, we also created space specifically to listen to young people. And young people are not an age bracket that politicians tend to talk to very often because they don't vote, right? They're too young to vote. And I turned to my staff, I said, I don't care. Our young people are stuck inside. They haven't been able to go to school. And in the middle of the pandemic, the peak of the pandemic, I said, we have to figure out how to talk to young people. How are we going to do this? And we started an online virtual through Zoom youth legislative town hall. We call it Students Speak. And in that very first session, they spoke so bravely and fiercely and in a very self-aware sort of way that frankly I never had when I was their age, about how they needed better mental health supports. And 3 weeks later, I had secured pilot state funding, $250,000 to create the first ever state-supported, state-sponsored youth mental health support text line. So young people can text right from their phone, anonymously, peer-to-peer with another team, and find a listening ear on the other side of the text line. And that pilot grew and grew, had massive success, a huge amount of use, right off the bat. That line is called Hey Sam. And then when it came time for the next budget to come around, this past budget, I secured full $1 million state funding to ensure that our young people all throughout the Commonwealth can get the mental health support that they need.
Yeah, it's amazing because our deputy here in Milford is starting a program. Mm-hmm. And you never know it, you never feel it if you're not involved.
Right.
When he started talking about picking up people who are homeless, who have mental health issues, mm-hmm. and having nowhere to take them.
Yeah.
And I mean, my hat's off to Robbie for going out and finding a grant from efforts like yours.
Yeah.
That there was money available to start it.
Right.
And I think once you start it kind of reminds me of kindergarten, when we had half-day kindergarten, mm-hmm. and we went to full-day kindergarten.
Yep.
3 years later, the grant ran out.
Yeah.
But it was like, well, of course we're going to have full-day kindergarten.
Right. I actually, just this past year, through collaboration with the local school committee members in another town, in the town of Rentham that I represent, they called me up and they said, Senator Rousch, we really want to implement tuition-free full-day kindergarten in our town. They still didn't have it. And in fact, there are other communities in my district that still also don't have it. They called me up and they said, we are so close and we're short a certain amount of money. And we can't find the money in our local budget. And I said, okay, let's see how close to yes we can, let's try to do this. Let's see what we can do. And sure enough, I started to piece it together and work with my staff. And wouldn't you know, when the final bill came through and we were working through all the final earmarks, I had secured the full amount of money so that town, those kids starting this year, every kid in the town of Rentham who is in kindergarten is going for a full day and their parents are not paying a dime because we were able to get that funding. And that's the kind of results that matter, right? And I've heard from so many parents who have said how much of a difference that made for them, especially in these tough economic times, right? Where everybody's still, inflation is real and we're trying to, we're putting some money back into people's pockets, which is terrific, shortly. So tax refunds are coming. And I, in fact, crafted even an additional plan to put some more money back into people's pockets. It's still being debated, but hopefully it's going to get through in the next few months. But those are the results that really matter. And those are the results we've been delivering.
Some of us are naive. I never thought that half of Milford High School kids were on free lunch program, which means their parents, their family is living on $34,000 or less.
Yeah.
It just amazed me.
Yeah. That's actually something, last school year, the federal government paid for free school lunch for everybody. But this year they said they weren't going to do it anymore. And, my colleagues and I said, nope, we are going to figure out how to do this. And sure enough, we have provided state funding to pay for there's free school lunches again for a whole additional year.
That to me is incredible.
Yeah.
Because how do you look at a kid who says they're hungry and turn your back?
Yeah. Food insecurity is a really big issue. It got certainly exacerbated during the peak of the pandemic, and that's one of the things that my staff and I have been helping people to make sure that they have access to food sources. I'm the chair of the Environmental and Natural Resources and Agriculture Committees, so I talk a lot about food systems and food sources. We have a lot of agriculture in Massachusetts, which, people don't necessarily think about Massachusetts as an agricultural state, and certainly not as big as, say, California, for example. But we have a lot of farms in Massachusetts, and and there's some really interesting and innovative ways when we can forge those partnerships and collaborations that not only help small businesses, right? Most farms are small businesses, but also, create like a farm to table path, right? And we're seeing a lot of youngsters get really excited about vegetables and growing veggies and, farming effectively, right? In a smaller capacity, smaller scale, right? But we're seeing a lot of engagement from young people in the schools and running these programs, and it teaches about nutrition and all sorts of wonderful good stuff, and people get food. So, it's a win all the way around.
You're the second one that's come on the show. Sheriff Lou from Worcester, meningitis, came on and talked about how he's at a program with a farm.
Yeah.
I never thought of Massachusetts. I think of farms, I think of the square states.
Right. Yeah. Farther west than here.
Way west.
Yeah.
But we're doing some really innovative things in Massachusetts.
We are, and, we've got also maple syrup and cranberries and, all sorts of wonderful things happening in Massachusetts. I was really honored, actually, this year. I got to tap the first maple tree. It's a job perk of being the chair of the Committee on Agriculture. It's really fun. You screw it in and it just kind of runs right out of the tree. It's really cool.
Again, if you talk to me about maple syrup.
You think Vermont?
Yes.
Aha.
It says on my little bottle in the morning, Vermont maple syrup.
Yep. We also have plenty of maple syrup right here in Massachusetts.
Now, it seems like mental health, physical health, the health side of this Commonwealth is near and dear to your heart.
It is. I was actually a healthcare attorney before I started working as a senator and started serving in this capacity. So, and as I mentioned, I'm mom of young kids, and any parent who's ever tried to schedule an appointment with the pediatrician will tell you how hard it is to be able to get an appointment with the pediatrician. And so I bring that lived experience to the table, right, to the chamber in the Senate. And so I filed a bill this term to make pediatric appointment access easier for people because we have a lot of private insurance companies, and you might have insurance through any one of them. Some of them cover one pediatric appointment per 12-month period. And if that's true, then from day one, if you're on one of those plans, from the time you start going for annual physicals, you can never get back, right?
One visit per child per year.
One well visit per year, right? Well, your annual checkup, right? I mean, you go once a year. Other programs, other insurance companies provide it for once per calendar year, right? So that way, if you miss one or you have to reschedule one, you can still sort of get back on track with your kid's birthday, which is around the time where you're supposed to go. But if you miss one and you're on a 12-month insurance plan rather than a calendar year insurance plan, it just
But-
keeps getting later and later and later. You can never get back on track.
If I talk to you as a mom, not
Yeah.
a senator, when was the last year you had one visit for your child all year?
Oh yeah, no, well, it's, sick appointments, or they need a booster shot or whatever it is. That's something else. But
Okay.
and insurance covers that too. But that annual physical, you only get one a year, and the doctor will make sure that you don't schedule it in a way that's going to force you to have to pay out of pocket, right? Because paying out of pocket is really expensive. And we want people to be able to get back on track. And so many people missed doctor's appointments during COVID, right? So we want to be able to change the policy to make life a little bit easier,
But
right?
now, how
Just
do you
make it
do
easier
that?
to get to the
The
pediatrician.
insurance companies aren't going to say, "Oh, great, we'd love to pay for multiple visits."
Well, it's not paying for multiple visits. It's just changing the rule a little bit.
Oh,
And
okay.
plenty of other states already do this, where all the insurance companies in the state have a once per calendar year visit. So, if your kid's birthday is in April and you miss your appointment in April one year and you end up going in June for some reason, which, life happens. So sometimes that happens. The next year, you don't have to wait until July. You just keep getting farther and farther away from April. The next year, because it's within a different calendar year, you just reschedule for April. No problem.
So what else is going on in physical health?
Yeah, well, it's probably very common knowledge by now for all your viewers that Roe v. Wade at the federal level has been overturned by our Supreme Court, which has just decimated access to reproductive health care in many parts of the country.
Does it affect, I hate to be cold, but does it affect women in Massachusetts?
So it does and it doesn't. But the only reason that it doesn't is because of abortion access legislation that we passed last term. And I was one of that laws called the Roe Act. And I was one of its fervent champions to make sure that people would have access to reproductive health care, the full spectrum of reproductive health care, because we could see what was coming. We could see that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned. And we knew that we needed to be prepared for that before it happened. Because if we weren't prepared for that, when that decision came down, people all throughout Massachusetts would have lost access almost immediately. We still had laws on the books from the 70s, right after Roe v. Wade was first decided. And those needed to be significantly
But
updated.
Becca, I don't want to be cold. Man, I guess I do. Why was it a surprise? You look at the Supreme Court.
Oh, no, it wasn't a surprise to me. That's why we were prepared in advance.
I was going to say.
But this is also a pretty significant distinction between me and the opponent who's running against me. He voted against that access legislation each and every time it came to the floor, whereas I was championing it, moving the legislation forward so that when Roe v. Wade was overturned, people still did have access to their health care. And even after the decision came down, we've since passed additional protective legislation to make sure that people who are accessing reproductive health care, providing, doctors and nurses who are providing reproductive health care, and people who are lending a hand, whether through funding or any sort of other assistance, that they are protected from prosecution in other states for providing that service or that help.
Now, help an old man understand. I live in Massachusetts.
Yep.
I elect my representatives to do what's right for Massachusetts. And I hear that other states are going to penalize people in Massachusetts. Wait a minute. Why does Idaho or someplace that I maybe never been don't really care?
Yeah.
I would not try and dictate what happens in Montana, not my right. Why do people in other states, pro or con, think they should, and how can they affect Massachusetts?
Yeah, well, I can't speak to what the thinking is in other states. What I can tell you is that here, leaders like me and others of my colleagues have worked really hard to ensure that everybody who is in Massachusetts and everybody who's coming to Massachusetts to get care will be able to get that care. In fact, in the law that we just passed, that we just enacted, just a couple months ago, really, I crafted components of that bill and certain pieces that were, that enabled the bill to get to the governor's desk. And that's a huge amount of work to make sure that we get it right. So how does it impact people in Massachusetts? Well, we're already seeing a pretty notable influx of people coming to Massachusetts to access reproductive health care that they can't get in their own state. So, so our healthcare providers are seeing more patients, and and that might, that's an increase in service, right? So that could have an impact. Might be harder. Everyone's working real hard to make sure that people can access their care. Depending on what happens in the future, we might need more reproductive healthcare providers coming into Massachusetts so that we can meet the demand. As people have said, maybe more businesses are going to come into Massachusetts because they want their people to be able to access reproductive health care freely, as we have been able to do for the last many years. And we will continue to be able to do here in Massachusetts. If we see more businesses come in because of that, then, there's growing our business community is great. We also have more people coming in, right? That impacts housing and schools and transportation. We've got all sorts of things. They all work together.
But now, again, it may be that I don't fully understand the derivative effects. Mm-hmm. But I was told that in vitro fertilization centers could be affected.
Right.
A friend of mine said they went through IVF, and obviously they harvest 32 eggs.
Right.
Cohort is 8.
Yep.
You hit on the first cohort or the second.
Right.
But now he said that he has to pay to maintain those eggs forever in certain states because they're considered
That's right.
life. I'm confused.
That's well, we share that confusion. But what I can say is that here in Massachusetts, in vitro IVF, access to contraception, access to the full spectrum of reproductive care and gender affirming care is safe and protected in Massachusetts because of the work that I and my colleagues have led on and done. And in fact, last term, to prepare for the moment when the Dobbs decision would come down, when Roe v. Wade would be overturned, again, because we knew it was coming. But in order for us to turn that legislation into law, we had to override a gubernatorial governor's veto, not once, but twice. 2 veto overrides to make sure that people could still access their reproductive health care when Roe v. Wade would be overturned. And sure enough, here we are.
Is it black and white?
I mean, nothing ever is.
That's what I'm trying to figure out, because I'm listening to the national debate, and they're talking about life starts at. So
here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. As a lawmaker, that is a question for you to answer personally,
right,
based on your beliefs, right? We have faith communities with a whole bunch of different perspectives on the answer to that question. That's not the question that I need to answer here. The question that I need to answer here is, does the government have any business being in the middle of a medical decision between a woman and that should be made between a patient and a doctor, right? The same way that every other medical decision is made between a patient and the doctor. And so this is the same. This is not my choice as a legislator to make for anybody else. This is a deeply personal decision with a slew of circumstances that I, as a lawmaker, have no understanding of because it's different for every person.
But now they're talking about contraception.
Yes, because that if I put my lawyer hat on for a minute, right, I'm a lawyer by training. I worked as an attorney in the private sector and the public sector before I was elected to the Senate. The way that the Supreme Court decision came down touches on IVF, it touches on contraception, it touches on same-sex marriage. It literally paves a path for a significant rollback of civil rights at the federal level, the likes of which I have never seen in my lifetime, the likes of which many people have never seen in their lifetimes. And it is dangerous. It is dangerous.
But wait a minute, didn't we go through this same-sex marriage thing? And, I remember somebody saying, well, if gay people move next door to you, your marriage could be at risk. And I'm sitting there saying, really?
Yeah, that didn't quite happen, did it?
Oh, wait a minute, I've been married over 40 years. That was a decision I made way back when. Mm-hmm. We've had this discussion when we have our Conservative View show. Mm-hmm. And I always get thumped on because when the word gay comes out, I say, who cares?
Love is love.
Well, to me, it's simple.
Love is love.
Don't try and make me gay. I won't try and make you straight. And we'll decide if we like each other. It becomes a simple position.
So the way the Supreme Court decision was written, and just the way that particular area of constitutional law at the federal level has grown and been developed and discussed through cases, particularly from the Supreme Court cases, all of those now effectively federally guaranteed rights are on the chopping block, potentially. And that's why our state legislatures are so incredibly important. Never before have our state governments been more important than they are right now. And so if you believe in marriage equality, if you believe in access to reproductive health care, if you believe in environmental protections, then get involved and pay attention to your state legislature and your state government, because we are the level of government where all of the work is happening because of what has already happened at the federal level.
Well, wasn't that the whole thing with Roe? They couldn't ban abortion totally.
But they're trying now.
Well,
they are trying at the federal level.
But they kicked it to the state level to say,
yeah,
you deal with it.
And that's why, but that's also what led to a federal case in the first place, right? Because you had different state laws on contraception, on abortion, all throughout the country, and it was a mess. And now here we are again, 50 years later, back in a mess, back in a big mess. And you were asking me earlier, how is this going to impact Massachusetts women? If you're a pregnant person who lives in Massachusetts and you want to travel, for example, you might end up in a state where if you need an abortion, you might not be able to get one. And that can be life-threatening in certain cases. Maybe your plane got delayed, right? Just for any number of reasons. So just another way that this may have
some of these
significant impacts.
Just don't make any sense to me. Okay,
well, that's why I'm fighting so hard to make sure that we have
interest
these protections here in
in
Massachusetts.
another man. Just like two gay men probably have no interest in me and my wife. They don't understand us. We don't understand them, but you respect each other's choice and move on with life.
Well, we are trying really hard to make sure that Massachusetts remains a place where all people are welcome, where we value people for who they are, and try to treat people equal. Just back to why I got into this in the first place, right? Make life a little bit easier, a little bit fairer, a little bit more equitable, and respectful, and and again, hopefully a little less expensive.
I like the less expensive.
Yeah.
When we jump topics now to the environment, something that seems to tickle your fancy.
Well, I am the chair of the environmental committee, so I spend a lot of time talking about climate. But even being a mom of young kids comes even into the work that I do on the climate front, right? In fact, we also had to override a governor's veto for this as well, to ensure that we were providing the $200,000 that I secured in our state budget to create the first ever statewide car seat recycling program. Right now, a number of other Baker's dozen estates already have this, right? You can take your used car seat, and car seats expire, right? You can check if you're a parent, you're listening, or a grandparent, you got a car seat in the car, check the expiration date. They do expire. And there's a lot of plastic in car seats, and that's all going into a landfill right now.
Car seats expire?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I wonder how many people know that.
Well, let's say it again so more people hear it. Car seats expire, and in order for you to keep your kids safe, you need to make sure that you're replacing your car seats before that expiration date. Now, if you're buying a new car seat, probably your kid is going to grow out of the car seat before the expiration date comes. But, a lot of people...
Kids with two kids.
Yeah, right. You use it for one kid, and then you use it for the next kid, and you use it maybe for the kid after that. You got to check that expiration date.
Then you buy cable TV and you stop.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, that's a lot of waste that we're putting into a landfill that we actually can recycle. And so, we looked around, and I personally was literally lifting up a car seat and saying, why can't I recycle this?
It weighs as much as my car.
And yeah.
For my
I know they're
granddaughter.
big. They can be big.
I mean, that's a ton of material.
Yeah, so we can recycle that, right? It'll be healthier for the planet and generating a lot less waste. And so, I led the charge to make sure that we had the funding to create a statewide car seat recycling program. And we did it. Done. Successful. Enacted into law. Funding is there. So that's one front. I also passed legislation to start the work on converting all of our school buses from diesel to electric. Right? And those fossil fuels, the diesel fuel is not only contributing to carbon emissions, right? We know that transportation actually is one of the biggest contributors to carbon pollution, but is also really detrimental, can be really detrimental for people's physical health. Right? You're breathing in those fumes and you have air pollution resulting from it. So this is both an environmental and a human health issue, right? To be able to convert our buses. And it's really difficult for a whole bunch of sort of nerdy reasons, but structural reasons, to shift our school buses, right? This is our kids we're talking about, from diesel fuel over to electric that, again, is not only healthier for the environment, but healthier for our kids. So I spearheaded that, and we got that done as well.
But now, is it practical? I mean,
sure.
I heard all the jokes. I'm the one that listens to Fox News halfway to work and then CNN the other half.
How does that feel emotionally for you, Al?
Well, they both say the same thing. They just point the finger the other way.
Got it.
And then every once in a while I'll change to Channel 120, the BBC, and try and get a cleaner perspective.
Oh, boy.
But you're hearing California's pushing for the electric cars, electric everything.
Yeah.
But now they've had to say our grid isn't strong enough, so don't charge your electric cars between the hours of 2 and 6 or something. Is that real, or is it just...
Well, I can't speak to whatever's going on in California, but I can tell you that, we passed a climate roadmap bill in my first term in office to set specific goals to make sure that we are taking meaningful climate action so that our children and our grandchildren and the generations to come have a livable planet. And frankly, so we have a livable planet in, 30, 40
I'm
years.
still here.
Yeah, right. So we passed that legislation. I was worked really hard to pass that, in collaboration with colleagues last term. It's another difference actually between me and the opponent in this particular race. I voted yes on that bill. The opponent voted no. This term, again, we passed additional climate legislation, partly to shore up the grid and make sure we have the resources. A huge component of it is on wind power, which is a growing, budding industry. So we're not only making doing some good, strong climate action, we're also creating new jobs, right? There's a whole green economy out there that we're growing and, helping people get into good, sustaining, good paying jobs. And in addition, we have the car seat recycling program that I created and the first steps of converting school buses from diesel to electric. And I also passed legislation in that package to address carbon emissions coming from existing really big buildings, right? This is Massachusetts. It's an old state. A lot of our big buildings are already here. And guess what? They're drafty and not very energy efficient. So they are some of our worst carbon contributors, right? Our worst polluters. So we need to do something about that if we're getting serious about meeting those climate goals that we passed 2 years ago.
But now, John Hancock Building, do something about it. What can you do?
Yeah, well, what we passed was reporting requirements. So we see every year how much energy is being used by these existing large buildings. And what we've seen, we're the first state to do it statewide. But what we've seen at the municipal level, Boston and Cambridge actually already passed this locally, and we've seen it in municipalities all across the country, is that just by reporting that data, people started to make improvements. Just by having to report how much carbon energy
keep
they're
it top
using.
of mind.
Yeah. And also, there's a growing consensus around climate action and making sure we're protecting our planet. And so when people start to pay attention, I think of it actually a lot about, or a lot like when people started putting calorie counts on menus at restaurants.
Yes.
Right? You look at it now, and you look at the calorie counts and you say, right, and that was a policy change, right? That was a law that got passed to put the calorie counts on the menu, right? And now you look at the menu and you say, oh, I'm not going to have that one because that's way too many calories.
Yeah,
right?
that little guy on the shoulder versus the other
Yeah.
guy. I love the fact that they're educating me. I hate the fact that all of a sudden I look at some of this food. You
say,
it's like,
maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Maybe I'm going to have
My
that
favorite salad
instead.
at a restaurant nearby, Oriental salad, I used to love.
Yeah.
Then I look at the dang calorie count, and my darling bride looks and says, of course it's pure sugar.
Yeah. So, same idea, different context, right? If we are more conscious, if our, especially the larger buildings and the owners of those larger buildings and the municipalities where those larger buildings exist are more aware of the carbon contributions that are coming from those buildings, maybe we'll start to see the same thing statewide that we've already seen at the municipal level, which is a reduction in those carbon emissions, right? Thereby making it safer, a better, a healthier planet for everybody, and also improving physical health.
I've got nothing against electric cars, but I worry. Is the grid going to keep up?
Yeah, we have to have the infrastructure for it. Absolutely.
Because I just can't see myself. I'm going to drive somewhere. Okay, now I got to wait 3 hours at some little gas station.
To plug it in. So what I will say is that, my understanding is that electric cars usually fully charge or can get recharged in about 15 minutes. Yeah, 15, 20 minutes. And that infrastructure is growing, and that's also something that, my colleagues and I worked to pass in the legislation this last term. And those components pretty heavily came from the Senate.
Because I was going to say, you're a mother. You've been in cars with kids. Now kids.
True.
We're going to sit here for 15 or 20 minutes. I just can't see that.
Yeah, that's a challenge. Our kids usually fall asleep in the car.
That's a good one.
Or we bring activity books, stickers, crayons. There are lots of ways to.
I'm glad to hear that we're working on the infrastructure.
Yeah.
As well as, because by legislation or by incentive, you can make everything electric.
Right.
But if the plug is empty.
Yeah, no, you have to have a way to charge it. That's true. But we did provide in that legislation infrastructure improvements and also a boost so that people could get some dollars back for buying an electric car.
Well, I think that's one of the things that you see, that not everybody can afford
Yeah.
$70,000 Teslas.
Oh, well, that's for sure. I mean, I can't.
But not every electric car is going to be $70,000.
That's true. And we've seen actually a big shift in the electric car market in the last couple of years, which is great, right? So we are seeing the price point come down a bit. And I think we'll continue to see that trend go forward.
Are we still seeing resistance to the windmills?
Not to my knowledge, but
I remember when they first talked about them on the Cape and all that.
yeah, I mean, I don't represent the Cape, so I would defer that question to my colleagues who do represent the Cape.
Tell me about who you represent. I mean, I remember when Richie Neal first came on and
Mm-hmm.
talked about the Banana Republic, that it went from Milford on one end
Yeah.
all the way to almost Springfield on the other.
Yeah, so the banana for me goes in the other direction. This district has Milford, Bellingham, Franklin, Rentham, Plainville, Norfolk, Millis, Medfield, Dover, Sherburne, and the town of Needham. So 11 municipalities. Slightly
they're all-
shifted from the
but they're all
district that I
pretty
currently.
close.
Yeah, I mean they're all contiguous, and I certainly spend plenty of time in each and every town in the district. And what I find in the district is that at the surface it might seem like there's a lot of disparities, between the different communities, but actually everybody's really just focused on a lot of the same stuff, making sure that our healthcare, both our physical and mental health care, that we have that care accessible and affordable, quality care, that reproductive health care is protected, and then we have a champion for reproductive equity in the Senate. I'm very proud to be endorsed by Planned Parenthood and Reproductive Equity Now, Emily's List, Mass Now, many organizations both within the state and nationally that are working to protect access to our health care, particularly in reproductive health. People want to make sure that all of our kids have access to quality education. We passed that bill in my first term, the Student Opportunity Act, that we continue to make sure that we are fully funding every cycle. And then in addition, those moments like making sure that my town that I represent, the town of Rentham, had the funding that they needed to get over that last hump to provide tuition-free full-day kindergarten for everyone in town. So there's focus on public education and making sure also that our teachers and our nurses are supported, right? I mean, if you've ever been, treated at a hospital or sent a kid to school, you know how important nurses and teachers are.
I tipped my hat to Beacon Hill last year when our school committee came to us and said, we're going to have over 200 new bodies,
Yep, 200
new kids coming in.
yep.
We need an extra $6 million. Yeah, I had the
Hefty
same
amount.
reaction.
Yeah, hefty. It's a big amount.
This is Milford. $6 million is not a true. If it was Boston,
Not nothing.
And then
It's not enough
we
an amount
found
for
out the
Boston either.
Student Opportunity Act gave us $7 million in incremental funds.
Yep.
Boy, that.
Phew. And that was a really important piece of legislation. I'm really proud to be endorsed by every major teachers organization, teachers union in the state, by our nurses organizations. So honored really to have their support, and we have been working together on a whole host of things over the years to support our teachers and our students and our schools in general, and also to support our nurses. And I mean, they are a significant part of the backbone of our healthcare delivery system. And so, so lots of good stuff in the works.
Now I'm hearing a sound that I never thought I'd hear from Beacon Hill. Instead of the sucking sound of tax money going up the hill.
It's coming back.
Yeah, I'm hearing there's rumors that I'm going to get some back.
You sure are. You can thank the voters from the 80s for that law, actually. There's a voter-approved law from the 80s that is now called Chapter 62F. That's the chapter in our general laws that it is. And by virtue of that law that they passed on the ballot back in the 80s, everybody this year is getting a bit of a tax refund. And so that should be coming through.
But it's not a bit, right?
It's a nice chunk. And there's even, we just sent an email out from my office today about this with an update. There's a calculator online that you can get an estimate as to what your tax refund is going to be. But the estimates, again, it's not a sure number, but the estimates are around 12 or 13% of whatever you paid in state taxes this year is going to come back to you right in your pocket.
Now, this is for everybody?
Everybody who paid taxes, yep.
It's not for people who worship on Tuesdays on a leap year?
Not as far as I know, Al.
I remember when we first heard the federal tax refund.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked around my house. My two daughters were paying taxes. My darling bride was paying taxes. I was paying taxes. We said, we're going to get something.
Yeah.
And then it turns out the only one in my house that got a tax refund was my sainted mother who hadn't paid taxes in 4 years.
Well, this one's coming back, and you can find out more information online. And we have some more information on my website, Becca Rousch, BeccaRouschMA.com. And if anybody has any questions, by all means, reach out to my office, and we'll try to get you those answers.
I love the sound of it coming back.
Yeah, it's a good sound. And also, when people started feeling that pinch at the pump, when the gas prices were really high, I said, my gosh, we got to figure out a way to put money back into people's pockets, right? Especially the people who are feeling that pinch the most. And so I crafted a plan to do that, to put hundreds of dollars back into people's pockets. And that proposal, actually different iterations of that proposal, have now passed both the House and the Senate, and the leadership of the two different chambers in the legislature are, hopefully be able to come to an agreement soon so we can put some more money back in people's pockets.
I mean, that seems nice, but it's really critical.
People all throughout my district we hear it. The pinch is real. We feel it. I feel it personally.
Half the families at Milford High students are living on $34,000 or less. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden gasoline.
Yeah, it comes up in
I mean,
price.
it's not a joke. And I love when the feds say, look, it's so great. We got it down to $3.50 a gallon. It was $2.50.
I remember when it was 95 cents. You probably remember even lower.
I was going to say, be careful. I'm going to really date myself.
Uh-oh. I remember when I first started driving, right, I grew up in New York, and so I remember there was like a ski, a partnership with one of the mountains that and one of the, gas stations where like if you filled your tank and you got to $10, then you could get a discount at this with your ski lift, like $10. Do you remember I don't even remember the last time. That might have been the last time I paid $10 for a
fill up.
Yeah.
The one that struck me the hardest was the first time I went to the Gulf. I was just outside of Riyadh, mm-hmm. and I went to fill up. It was an American 1960s Impala, one of those big boats.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
And it was 10 cents a gallon.
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't remember that.
No, it was the only place. I mean, I was stunned because for $3 I filled a tank.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
But it worries me because obviously fuel oil isn't getting any cheaper.
True. Well, and that brings us back to those electric vehicles, right? Solar panels. I have people in my district who put solar panels on their house and haven't paid an electric bill since. And, and that's really incredible. I mean, that's incredible. And, the less reliant we become on fossil fuels, the more,
and again,
the better off we are.
I'm absolutely for being energy independent. Mm-hmm. I just worry that when we first started saying, stop the fossil fuels now, all of a sudden I saw my gas bill go through the ceiling.
Yeah, well, everything has to come in its own time.
Yeah, but I don't want to sink the boat while it's coming.
And you can't do that either. That's why it takes some really good collaboration and legislative skill to be able to deliver the results that are going to make an impact and make a positive change and not sink the ship while you're doing it.
So if you looked at the biggest challenge you're going to face in the new term, mm-hmm. what would you tell somebody?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I think everything...
And you got to think of the person in the mirror. Because you could probably fool everybody else, but
no,
not
I truly, things change really fast right now. If someone had asked me even 6 months ago, or maybe not me because I was expecting it to come, but if someone had asked, sort of an average, just anybody, what's going to be the biggest challenge in 6 months, probably most people wouldn't have said Roe v. Wade's going to get overturned at the Supreme Court, and we're going to have a whole new landscape of trying to figure out how people all throughout the country are going to actually access their reproductive health care. Now, again, I foresaw that coming, but I certainly didn't have a pinpoint on the timing of it, right? So we are living in a rapidly changing world. What's going to be the biggest challenge in the next term? I don't know, but that's why I'm running for re-election, because my track record shows that my skills and experience are exactly what yields positive outcomes no matter what's coming at us, right? I certainly didn't run the first time based on what I would do in a global deadly pandemic, right? And yet that came. That came, and and shoring up our public health infrastructure was in fact something that I was working on before, and then became infinitely more important to make sure that we have that health infrastructure in place, right? And that in turn supports our small business community, right? So that people feel comfortable just walking into the shop, right? The way that we did in the before times, and now we're doing again. And impacts the schools and all sorts of other things. So, who knows? Who knows what the next thing is going to be? I think public health will continue to be part of the forefront. Education, I think, will continue to be part of the forefront. Supporting small businesses, definitely part of the forefront of our next legislative term. And actually, one of the things that I have done as senator is to create a small business advisory council. And we bring in a dozen small business owners from within the district just to create space to talk. And, the best that we can do to support small businesses is to actually listen to the people who are running them right now and say, what's working for you? What's not working for you? What can we be doing at the legislative level to better serve you and better support you? And in fact, we've been able to take the comments and concerns and feedback that we've gotten from our council members and turn that into legislation that we've successfully passed. So who knows what's coming in the term
Well,
to
we're
come.
gonna have-
What I do know is that we're going to be prepared to address
We're
it,
going to have a
whatever
new
happens.
governor.
We are going to have a new governor, yep.
Do you see a big impact?
Oh, definitely.
How so?
Well, the executive branch makes the government run, right? The legislative branch sets the laws and the policies, and the executive branch makes it go. We one way or another, we are going to have a new person there, right? Because our current governor is not running for re-election, and when you have somebody new at the helm, things change.
But it's interesting because I've always taken pride in the fact that I have a hard time trying to figure out the difference between a conservative Democrat and a liberal Republican in Massachusetts. Because you've got your two extreme sides, but the middle seems to meld together. So I really worry or wonder, is it really going to change much?
Well, time will tell. What I can say is that, the folks in the towns that I've had the distinct honor and privilege of representing have always voted the person.
Yeah.
And they voted the person when they elected me the first time in 2018. They voted the person again in 2020 when they re-elected me into my second term that I'm currently serving in. And I hope that they will re-elect me for a third time so we can keep doing this good work together.
I agree with you because a very extreme liberal scares me as much as a very extreme conservative. Because anybody who's voting dogma isn't listening.
Yeah, one of the things that I have been very proud to champion in the legislature is transparency and accountability. And oftentimes, particularly when it came to voting on the record, especially at the beginning of my service in the Senate, it was all the Republicans standing up to support that transparency and that recorded vote, and me. And that's it, and everybody, sort of knew that was going to happen after the first time that it happened, and it just kept happening.
Well, thank you for being at Craft Roots. Thank you for being at the educational system and everywhere else you've been already before you officially start representing us. And good luck.
Well, thank you so much, Al. I look forward to many more of these conversations and to serving the fine folks of Milford.
And as always, I'll never ask you to vote for a specific candidate, but I'll beg you to become educated and vote. We had 9% turnout in the spring. That's not Milford. You need to get out. And whether I agree with who you vote for or not, I'll respect anybody who gets up and votes. So please get out and vote. And as always, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Far too long since I've been home.